Welcome, welcome. My name is Aoife, and I am a mind body coach for highly sensitive women. And I help highly sensitive women or women anyway to use these mind body techniques to get their lives back from chronic health conditions, anxiety, depression, and many other debilitating conditions that have just, taken the zest of life out of them, taken the light out of their eyes. Like, they don't have any hope for the future. They're worried about the future. They're grieving the life that's kind of been taken from them by the chronic health condition, because this was my story. That's why I'm saying it in such detail. And today I'm joined by one of my former clients, the lovely Lianne. And she is just going to share with us a bit about her story and what it's looked like for her to get her life back from wherever it was. So I'm super excited that she's here. I'm going to be sharing some incredible wisdom and just truths for anyone out there who really needs to hear this today. So welcome, Lianne.
Thanks, Aoife. I miss you.
Yay, me too. It's so nice to reconnect with you in this way. Yeah, we had such a beautiful time coaching together and just spending all that time together. So when I first met you, do you want to share a little bit about what was going on? I know you had already found the mind body connection, but yeah, there was a lot going on for you. So if you want to rewind a little bit and tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so December 2019, I was driving on the freeway, picked up my son, who was 3 at the time, which I can't believe it's been that long. So he was 3 at the time, and I just felt like I was going to pass out. Thankfully, I didn't, made it to my mother-in-law's house, and like just all these weird neurological symptoms started to come up. And yeah, so then that started a whole bunch of things. And it was just I that like 2020. I know that was a crazy year for so many reasons. Like we hit, the pandemic and everything, but that for me personally, like I went into my own like exile, like the my health just it's not even like that my health was deteriorating at that point. It was just like all like symptom after symptom after weird symptom kept coming up. And I kept going into the doctors, went into the emergency room once because I like had like a huge flare up of symptoms when I was like walking around Costco and like had no idea what was going on and like was shaking uncontrollably. I mean, like we can list it out at the bottom, like how many symptoms there were. It was insane. And then, yeah, the world went into lockdown. I did the same, went into lockdown, stayed at home, like could barely walk through the house. I had to you know, hold on to the walls, could barely stand. Um, so we just going in and out of the doctors, not and the doctors being so confused because I had like every single test, EKGs or EMGs, nerve conduction tests, like because I just like my mind wanted to move, but my body couldn't. It was just in total shutdown mode. And it was so frustrating and so scary. So yeah, I had to be wheeled in a wheelchair, could not walk every time I had to go to these appointments and do the tests. And it was just like it was awful. And eventually I didn't even get diagnosed with anything. They threw all kinds of labels that they were testing for, but because my symptoms were so weird and they didn't quite fit any of the criterias of like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, post-concussion syndrome, like they were just adrenal fatigue, all these things, MS, that was a huge, that was one I was terrified of, but every test was coming out clean. And so I just like no one knew what to do. So left the conventional route, went through the whole alternative route with the acupuncture, with the massage, with PDTR, which is the super, like at the time it was, cutting edge, like muscle testing, this new therapy. And it was a weird one. Like it was just, yeah, just super weird. And just all these like, running diagnoses that nobody knew. And there was just no answers, basically. So then my sister had to move in. I had two kids at the time. They were 3 and 1. So I had really young kids. I couldn't do anything and no answers. So my sister moved in at the time to help me out and help my family out because I couldn't do anything. Like I was just completely housebound, couldn't do any chores, nothing. And then in September 2021, I discovered the mind body connection. I discovered Dr. Sarno, tension myoneural syndrome. And I was like convinced, I believed 100% that this is exactly what's going on with me. And so I think once I found that out, and oh, by the way, the neurologist had me on an antidepressant too, because I had like tingling sensations, and so she prescribed an antidepressant, saying like maybe this is going to help, like just take it for a year. And it was a low dose, so of course I followed what she said. And so after a year I was like, I don't like to be on medication, like I don't think it's doing anything. So I came off of that and experienced like the worst withdrawal. Like I remember I was trying to walk. We had a family trip, and this is one of the one times where I was like, you know what, I'll go. We went to an aquarium, and I just sat on the side the whole time, just completely suffering with the symptoms, just trying to hold it together. And then we had to, after it was done, we had this short walk, to go back to the car, and my legs just lost all feeling. They just gave out. That was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced in my life. And now I know that that was like my brain recalibrating, like with withdrawal, like all of those things. But at the time I was like, I don't know what's happening. Oh, but yeah, let me backtrack a little bit. So when that happened, I was Googling, which now I know nobody Google, just don't Google like symptoms anymore. But I was just Googling you know, like what could, paralysis of the limbs mean, things like that. And I found a mind body type of page that said, like, oh, it could mean anger, resentment. I don't remember what the emotion is. And then I got feeling back in my legs right there. So that was the clue for me. I was like, huh, okay. And then a month or two after that was when I discovered TMS. So I was like, hey, this is it, 100% convinced. I'm going to challenge the symptoms. And then thankfully, there was a lot of free resources now on YouTube and books and things. So of course, I dove in, read everything, trying to absorb all the information. And then I went on a 2-week vacation to Hawaii. So I'm from Hawaii, so most of my family's still there. And my husband is Hawaiian, and he has a lot of family, or no, his family decided to come in. So it was this big, gigantic trip, 2 weeks long, super packed, busy itinerary, tons of family to see, like just, like, like for a nervous system, right? You're like, oh my gosh, it's kind of a lot. But this is like, I was like, I found out about the mind body. I can do this. Went on the trip and was symptomatic, but had so much fun. So coming home, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get better. Like I could handle that trip. I had a really good time. I wasn't in bed all day. Like I was participating in everything and paddle boarding and, hanging out with family, dance. So it was like, I was like, okay, cool. But then when we came home, I discovered that I was pregnant, and it was like an unexpected thing. I was like, how the heck am I going to do this mind body recovery and be pregnant at this? Like, I didn't, I didn't know what to do with that. And I don't like all the success stories at the time, like you don't hear a lot of that happening where, someone learns about TMS and the mind body connection and they're going through challenging the symptoms, but then now they're pregnant. So that was very challenging, but I checked with a few TMS experts and they were like, no, pregnancy doesn't change anything because, you're still trying to like the source of your symptoms is still the brain, let's just remain calm and whatever. So I did honestly, I did really well. I would say, like, I really got on with life again. My sister, who lived with us for those 2 really dark years, she ended up moving out because I was able to start driving a little bit again, picking my son up from school. And I was pregnant too. So I was feeling kind of, like really like, okay, Lianne, like you're handling this, like you're doing such a good job. And I was still symptomatic and things, but I was challenging the symptoms. But now in hindsight, looking back, I think the fear was growing because it's just like fear is always going to be there. And I think for me, there was still a lot of doubt. Um, yeah, there was still a lot of doubt because I'm pregnant. Like I just couldn't wrap my head around that. You know what I mean? Like there's just yeah. So um I got to 8 months or and then having to go in for the checkups, and they take your blood pressure and like it's rising. Oh, I think that's what was scaring me at the time because my blood pressure was rising. And I kept telling the nurses, like, no, I'm this is anxiety. Like, you're trying to explain the mind body connection and trying to explain like the PTSD from, all the medicalization before. But of course, they're sticking to their protocols, which I understand. So anyway, we get to 8 months and I got an onset of like really scary symptoms. Like it was an ocular migraine, which if you've never experienced that before, I hope you never do. It was terrifying. And yeah, I was just having like weird symptoms, like weirder, more intense symptoms come up. So of course I had to go in, and then through a series of events, I had to deliver my daughter early, like 6 weeks early. And just being in the medical system was so wildly difficult, I will say, because they're checking you constantly. You're so well, at least for me, I was so symptomatic, but now I know it's from terror. I was like terrified, like there's the added emotional stress. And and I guess the, I don't know, anger, resistance that was coming with like, I know what this is, but you're telling me that it's something else, and then they're throwing all these other labels at you, like, oh, we think you might have this, oh, you need to be checked for this. It was just like like the craziest situation I've ever been in, knowing about the mind body connection too. So and then my daughter, because she was born early, thankfully there was nothing wrong with her. She was just small and she just needed to be in the NICU for a few weeks. Like I remember just being at like my rock bottom, like because I just delivered a baby. I'm exhausted. I'm so symptomatic. Um, Back in a wheelchair when I had spent the whole 9 months prior, like building up, the challenging the symptoms again and things like that. So that was really rough. And then we had to like trek back and forth from, first it was our hotel room, and then we had to trek back. Then they moved us to I'm sorry, from our hospital room, and then they moved us to a hotel that we had to trek back and forth. So, and then I'm so weak, like, yeah, all these symptoms, and I have to trek back and forth and take care of this new baby in the NICU. Eventually they moved us closer to a hospital closer to our home because I had to deliver at a emergency hospital an hour away. So even that, like the whole thing was just crazy. And it just required like so much grit and you know, all of that. And so I remember one of the most defeating times was when I summoned all my courage to walk just a few feet from the hospital room to the NICU. And I sat on the chair with my baby in the incubator. And the nurse goes, "Do you want to change her diaper?" And I couldn't, like, I just, like, I couldn't explain to the nurse, like, I can't stand right now. Like, I literally cannot. I do not have the strength, you know? Like that, yeah, that was pretty tough. But thankfully, thank God we made it through that. Oh, and then on top of that, my two sons who are in the care of my in-laws and my family, they all got COVID like at the same time. So it was just like this huge explosion of stress, you know? Um, and that was hard to navigate. But I have to say, I'm like, the way that it went as well as it could have. Um, and just knowing about the mind body connection, I know that helped so much, because otherwise I would have, like, the resilience would not have been there, like I just would have been like, this is ridiculous, like I cannot do this. But you do have, in those situations, you have to push a bit, you know um so anyway, we get home, we have a new baby. I am like worse than I've ever been, and just really, like, I still believed 100% that this is a mind body thing, but I just felt so stuck. And I just felt like I wasn't getting better, and I was getting worse. And now there were more stresses, with nursing the baby, not sleeping, and then like and then with my kids, they kept catching like virus after virus. Like, I know I hear a lot of parents saying that that's been a common thing because of the pandemic, like as the world started to open up, like just more viruses coming around. Like, it was a really stressful time. And so at this point, I trying to think back. At this point, I came home with the baby and then was still trying to do this recovery and have a newborn, like, on my own for 7 months. And then, like, after a big flare up one night, December of 2022, I just had it. I was like, I'm so over this. Like, this is so hard to do by myself. So then I came across your videos, Aoife, on YouTube, and there is just something about you. Like I think it was one of your videos that you talked about, like your body processing unnecessary, like emotions like guilt and shame and all these things, like process, like your body's generating so much unnecessary stress because of these emotions. Like, it was one of your videos and I was like, huh, that's something different. She's bringing a different angle than all these other, like, coaches. And I don't know, I was just drawn to you. And then you're like, like, coach for highly sensitive women. And I was like, I would never have considered myself sensitive, but when in this context and the way you were explaining things, I was like, Lianne, I think you're super sensitive on the inside, and like you do have big, like, I just felt really validated because, like for one, someone was saying, like, yes, there are people out there with big emotions and it's a superpower, and it's not something to shy away or to repress and suppress and things like that. So I just got really curious about that. So then I reached out to you, and within the first few months, like with the tools that we were doing and we were talking about, like, you really helped me see how hard my inner critic was, so harsh. And it's crazy because there's so many layers to that, because you'll get a layer where you're like, oh wow, I've been so hard on myself, and then you think you get it, and then you keep going on with your life and you start noticing your thoughts, you start noticing your behavior, and you start questioning, like, oh, why do you react this way? Like for me, I was like, wow, you really react like this is an interesting thought. It's really, and then you just take a step back from that thought and for me, I could see like, oh, this is adding way more stress to the situation that doesn't need to be there. And I'm like, oh, okay, it was me like this whole time, you know? Um, and just like the tools that we use, it revealed a lot of what was going on in my heart that I did not anticipate was there. Because I think when you grow up in this society, like we keep saying, it's a patriarchal society, like especially with for women, we're taught like we have to be independent, overachieving. Like this is where all these perfectionists and people pleasing characteristics, the personality traits come into play. And it's so common. I feel like it's way more commonly talked about now, but I find that you can know about it. It's just like mind body stuff. Like you can know about it, but if you're actually not implementing and integrating that knowledge, then you're carrying on the same patterns. So it really does take, like I understand now when people say like, oh, you have to do the work. I think the work in this case, I've realized for myself is the work is recognizing these patterns in you, you know, like these thoughts, these behaviors, these beliefs, and then asking yourself, like, do I want to follow through with these as I have been my whole life, as it was working before? But then you come to a point with chronic illness or relationship issues or whatever, I've learned that you come to a point where you're like, okay, these thoughts are not helping anymore. They're making life so much harder. And so just having the empowerment to, or not just like feeling empowered by that, you know, because then like one of your writing exercises, I love that idea, like where we say like I take full responsibility, I take complete responsibility over myself, and my reactions, my emotions, everything. Like I think back in my old programming when I heard that, to me that equated to defeat, because it's like, oh, all right, well, I have to take responsibility. But when you understand that taking full responsibility for yourself and like reparenting yourself and being more truly, genuinely more loving and more compassionate to yourself, that is true empowerment. That keeps your power with you. And that's what I've learned. It's very like this whole journey is it feels so paradoxical. I don't know if that's a word, but paradoxical or whatever, and counterintuitive, because we're under this programming that no longer works. Like that's the best explanation I can think of. So um yeah, so for me, like I really I understand now. I'll catch myself like whatever knee-jerk reaction I have to symptoms or a situation or anything like that. Uh, I know that I can take a pause there and like and it takes practice, but I know now like I can decide which program I want to go by, if that makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. I'm just totally just absorbed in everything you're sharing. It's just so beautiful. And something you just touched on there was like taking your power, like feeling more powerful and more empowered. And for me, when I was so sick and had been to so many doctors and healers and I was none the wiser for 30 odd years of research and consultants, and I'm privileged person, had had access to all the best medical care and alternative care, and I was none the wiser. And that made me feel none the wiser as to what was going on, why I was so sick, why I had all these endless symptoms that were getting worse. And I felt so powerless. And that was making me more stressed. That was making, I didn't realize, like, there were so many things, like the old patterns and beliefs that I kept running that were keeping me in a state of chronic stress. And then just feeling so hopeless and helpless and so powerless after throwing everything, my whole life, throwing everything at wanting to understand this and wanting to feel better. I just felt so helpless and out of control and so powerless. And that was, again, an incredibly stressful state of mind, like to be in. And that was making me so much worse. So for me, finding that moment, I also had that have, not everyone maybe has that kind of like total belief or understanding when they find the mind body connection. Maybe it takes time or whatever. Everyone's different, nothing's right or wrong, but I knew within like 2 minutes of hearing about the mind body connection, I get goosebumps even remembering it. But I just knew. And for me in that moment, even though, obviously no symptoms or nothing had changed, I had such relief. I felt like this huge relief had come over me, and that was beginning for me of like getting my power back. I was like, there's something I now understand about myself, something fundamentally that like I should have learned day one in school, wherever, that I now understand about myself that I never understood before. And that for me was like the first moment of taking my power back. And then from then on, it was like, that wasn't okay, job done. I've reached my destination for sure. That was just like, okay, now I've stepped into a new world almost. I felt like I crossed over some kind of threshold of some kind. And then there was like a whole other world of learning to do about my nervous system, about me and my beliefs and my patterns and what my body, how this had all been manifesting in my body. And yeah, and part of that, a massive part of that was like you already shared, because you did straight away, you went on holidays, like, to Hawaii. A massive
Yeah.
part of that I knew was to get back into life. And I like you, I jumped into different things, and I started like, very quickly I started eating food I hadn't ate before. I started like, I used to not be able to get cold or wet or anything, and I jumped in a river. I was doing these things. I was like, oh my God, it was exciting, but I was still like, like all kinds of like symptoms of, if anything, they probably got worse. They were like, what are you doing, woman? But the
Yeah.
fear, something had fundamentally shifted in me. Like it was like fear had really lost its grip on me. And I really felt like I had some power back, but didn't mean that I was like, reached my destination at all. But I had really started to walk upon new ground, for want of like a better description. But so then you had also a bit of a journey with then like um getting your life back, or getting back to life as well.
Yeah, I did. I mean, but so similar, just what you said, because it's one of those things where I was just like, I need to snatch my life back. I literally need to snatch my life back. And I think somewhere along the lines of when we were working together, I realized that the way that I felt about my symptoms, like the fear and the frustration, like that was probably how I felt about myself. Like those are probably the emotions that my inner voice or my inner self felt about myself. So that helped me to put things in perspective, because if I was feeling, when I would get frustrated or like the fear would come on again when a symptom would arise, then I was like, oh, okay, but I want to change this response. And it came from us like going through, like really teach you literally had to teach me how to be kind to myself. Like the compassion piece that a lot of people talk about is so crucial, because and I kind of I see this play out with my son. Like he's 5, so like as I we talk a lot about softening, like softening to ourselves, and like, because growing up, at least for me, I realized I was never validated, or I felt like I was never validated. My emotions weren't validated, my thoughts. Like I just felt I didn't felt seen. So I squashed that part of me. And then, um, yeah. So, um, yeah, so like it was just realizing like how deep that programming was. And just like, so when the symptoms would arise and I would feel that frustration come up, I would just talk to myself, like reparent and say like actually I find it really funny that I had a daughter, because I have two sons and now I have a daughter. And her timing that she came when she came was interesting, because of course, like I went into this super nurturing, like mom mode. I have a new baby and I kept calling her like, it's okay, little mama, it's okay, baby girl, right? And that's new language for me now, because I've had two boys, and now looking back, I wasn't as softened as I am now with her. But as I was learning to do that with her, then it clicked in my head like, oh, that's how I should be talking to myself, So like I thought it was very interesting, like that naturally was coming out of me, that love, because I had my daughter. So then when a symptom would flare up or would come up, then I would use that language on me, and it was already there because my daughter came. So she was really like such a huge blessing that we never knew we needed.
I love that so much. I have so many goosebumps. It's so beautiful. And it's interesting you're saying that, because so many of my clients, they're like, they will only admit to me, like, it's so funny, like after we've been working together for a while, and they're like, the way you tell me to like talk to myself, I can't. It's too awkward, and I'm not mushy. I'm not like I don't know, soft. I'm like, no, they're just like, oh, I can't be that soft and kind. It's like I can't actually speak to myself in that kind of soft way. That's not what I'm used to. It's awkward, it's weird. Um, so it's really interesting. And then one of my clients, she had two kittens, which is different to having a daughter for sure, but it helped her really early on in our work together, because she was describing to me her symptoms, and the way she spoke about her symptoms with such aggression, such
Yeah.
anger and aggression. And I said, and I didn't, I was just like, I said, is that how you talk to your two like baby kittens? She was like, no way. I call them my angel babies. And I'm like, all right, you're gonna shift all this energy in the way that you're relating to yourself. And she started calling her IBS, her angel babies, and that started to shift things for her. So it's so beautiful that your daughter came in at this time, that for you, it's so stunning.
It's incredible. That was my one of many aha moments. Like I was like, oh, like she helped to soften, like, yeah, the way she came in was a little chaotic, but man, she was really like what I needed to help get into that softer place. And then in that regard too, like with symptoms, you just come from a softer place. And yeah, every once in a while, like the frustration comes up, because that's a neural pathway. That's how, like, it's not like things can change very fast. I absolutely believe that. But also things can take time, and we just don't know. And us trying to figure it out too, like that time frame wise, this is what I was doing. That's fully doing that. That just adds more stress. You really see how much you're adding more stress. But then realizing that, and like not beating yourself up, not judging yourself, like that was huge for me. I didn't realize that, like I judged myself about everything, like, positive emotion, negative emotion, and just not making anything bad. Like these are just things coming up, and then you can just decide, okay, what can I do with this, and just release the judgment. That's been huge for me too. And so that's been very helpful dealing with symptoms as they come up. And actually, I'm seeing like, because my my response to symptoms has changed so much already. Like I'm noticing that that same mentality is translating to my parenting, because like my son, if he's having a tantrum, or if they're having a hard time, it doesn't bother me, like it's not like I don't feel as triggered nearly as much now, because I've been rehearsing and practicing with the symptoms, right? Just like being very compassionate and just indifferent, like all these things. It's just there's no, the fear is so little now. And like I see that translating, like that patience, that compassion is also translating to my parenting, because now I'm not phased, and I realize if I don't give any reaction to that, or very little, they'll my son will just switch his mood just like that sometimes.
Oh,
Like, oh
cool.
my god, it's just like a symptom. you know
Yeah, I start to see everything in life as a symptom then. I'm like, ooh, what else?
Right. That was one of the most genius things that you said during one of our coaching calls, when I was running into like relationship issues with my husband, as we do, because we're human and we're learning how to live together and, grow a life together. And you're like, I think of it like as a flare up, as a symptom. And I was like, that's such a good way to put it. And then that reduces the fear, that reduces the tension and the stress right away, because it's just like, oh, okay, you treat it the same.
Totally. And that's why I love just like working with like a couple of simple tools, which is all about like deactivating the fear, bringing in compassion and love, and then just seeing what's really going on here, patterns, beliefs, what can I change? What can I and then once you kind of are trained up in that, those kind of like basic simple tools, then you can just apply it to everything, like parenting,
Yeah.
relationships, money, like whatever is coming up, all the big stuff. But why don't you share a little bit about, I love how you describe snatching. You were like, I just gotta snatch my life back. I can, like, so like tangible or visual, like just seeing that snatching your life back. I know what it was like for me snatching my life back, but share with me a little bit about what it was like for you snatching your life back, because you're a fast snatcher.
No, I'm like you, like I just with your like reassurance and support, that too, like it's, I think if whoever is listening, if you're doing this on your own, like it's absolutely possible that you can recover on your own. That's fantastic. But man, is it hard. like that's what I was trying to do. And then just, but when you connect with people that you really resonate with, who are a few steps ahead of you, then you, like, the kind of support that you feel and that you get is just, it's indescribable. Like it's unmeasurable. It's so necessary. I think, at least for me, it was. I don't know where I'd be if we didn't work together, and I didn't learn how to really, like, what true compassion really looks and feels like for yourself. But yeah, no, I'm like you. So I just started going out. I just started doing all kinds of stuff. Like, we've been traveling. We just came back from a youth camp, which was like really grueling. What else? Went to a baseball game in San Francisco, and really, and oh, it felt so good to be back in the ballpark, like, because it's just, I think it's such a magical place. And then actually, just this past weekend, I got to MC a little bit for my sister's engagement party. So I was on stage, and it was like, I don't know what I was saying. I was just like, like talking like a fool. But then when I got off the stage, like, I was like, okay, Lianne, you're so rusty. Like, like, haven't been on stage in a while or talked in front of people on a mic in a long time. And I could feel like the no judgment. Like, before, I probably would have been beating myself up, like, oh, why did you act like that? Why did you say that? You're such a fool. But it was really just like, okay, Leanne, you're super rusty. It's okay. We're gonna work on it. Like, just such a loving place. And then just letting go of like embarrassment, whatever. Because you just, like, listen, like, going through this journey, you really learn how to just not care anymore. Like it doesn't matter. Like you don't care what people think. Like you're going through this like really tough recovery period. That probably the toughest thing, one of the toughest things I'll ever go through in my entire life. So like just developing that like I don't care, so what attitude. I see it happening, translating now in other aspects of my life, which is very freeing. And I went on stage again and I sang this past weekend, which was huge. So like there's, you're under the lights and you're singing and dancing, and yeah, so I got back up on stage and started singing. So that was huge.
Congratulations. That's
Oh
amazing.
yeah. I'm really patting myself on the back for that. And it felt so good. It felt so good to be back up there to sing for a bit. So um yeah. So and then a big thing too. So one of my symptoms is like low blood sugar, that feeling I was having that 24/7. And I was invited to fast for spiritual reasons. And this is I've always avoided fasting because I was like, I cannot do this. Like there's no way I can do this. But I had gained enough confidence in the mind body connection with us working together that I was like, you know what? Let's just do it. So what? Let's do it. And I have now fasted 3 different times, 23 to 24 hours. And I'm still here. I'm still alive. Like, so that was huge. That was a huge message of safety to my brain. Like, okay, we can do this, and like, yeah, just being able to take my son to his jujitsu class by myself, like driving there and, sitting through the class. We go biking almost every day. Like me and my kids, I take them to the park and I actually can like push them on the swing for a long time now. Couldn't do that before. We went to SeaWorld, like we've been, flying, going to different places. We're going to a convention this week. So yeah, it's been go, go, go. And I find I don't consider myself fully recovered. Like that's gonna come when it's gonna come. But when I look back at my life, and yeah, when I'm like preparing for this call, I was like, dang, I've been doing a lot. Okay. Like we went swimming last night, yeah, just starting to really get back out there despite the symptoms, because they're an afterthought now,
I
you
love
know.
that so much. And word that you used was it felt so freeing, right? When you were talking about singing. And when I talk to like so many women who are, they have all these debilitating symptoms, and I am kind of wanting to get to know like what do they want, where do they want to get to? And everyone always ends up at some point using the word freedom. And like you want to be symptom free, but you want to feel what you really want is to just feel free. Um, and what I always see, and because is my experience also, is that freedom came first. Like
I get
freedom,
that.
the freedom for me, when people always say like, well, are you anxiety free? Are you free of this? Are you free of that? Are you free of that? I'm like, wow, I just don't think like that anymore. I feel free. Like, so I did from personally, I did feel free from the moment I had that information that it was that this was the mind body connection. I just knew it in my bones. But then of course there was a whole journey, and but I didn't feel totally free and I was still figuring so much out. But for me, it's not in the freedom that I feel. I feel free from like the symptoms or whatever I was experiencing doesn't have the power anymore. And I am free. I was so restrained by like the IBS, the special foods, the anxiety, the fatigue. I couldn't get out of bed. I felt like I was in a prison. And then the mental torture of it all as well was just it was a whole prison. But then I suddenly felt free. And then I started to live from that place. And then for sure getting knocked back and still fearing the symptoms and things like that. But was just like stretching that freedom. I always think of elastic band for some reason, because then, I would get snapped back. I would get snapped back again. I get snapped back again. But all the time, this feeling of freedom growing, freedom and confidence and all kinds of other things like in that realm. But it wasn't based on, oh, like not having symptoms. I wasn't like, oh, I feel free now because I had a whole day where I had energy and I slept well and I didn't have my bladder thing and I didn't have this and this. It was just like, no, I'm free. That might sound totally nuts. I don't even know if it makes sense, but it's just like, because I just hear this word so much, of freedom. People want freedom, but then they see it as like, I want to be symptom free. And it's like, I feel like when you get on the other side of this kind of, like, if you get on board with this kind of mind body process and you get some tools that really work for you, then you're free to live your life, snatch your life back. And like you said, the symptoms are an afterthought.
Yeah.
What the hell
And
is that? Like,
once in a while, yeah, they'll come up to the forefront, and then the little panic starts happening and you're like, wait, hold up. Okay, bye. Like, and then you just move on
right? And
because
I could not have, I'm sure you're the same, but speaking for myself, I could not have imagined that.
yeah.
If you came to me in 2017, that was like, that was like the final straw for me. That was rock bottom. And I always say this, like, if you asked me like what, like, you have one wish to be granted, I would say I want my symptoms gone. But little did I know that would not have set me free. It was me. I set me free. I got the freedom. And then the symptoms are an afterthought. Some of them disappear. They might like pop back in or do whatever, but I'm free. And for me, that's what snatching or getting my life back really was and is. And it's always, and it's still a growing process, right? I'm just in this process. I figured out these tools that I love that worked for me because I'm highly sensitive and a woman or whatever. I like these simple tools that work for me, and I just embody them and use them and keep using them to continue to like grow and blast through these like belief systems. And I guess for me, I'm just like, when people are like, how long will it take? Is it going to be 3 days, 6 weeks, 2 weeks, a year, 2 years? Like, it's just like, give me a timeline. I want to know. And I understand why, like, because I was the same like that. And now I'm like, oh, this is a beautiful unfolding of the rest of my life. And I want to have these, and I have these tools. I have my treasures, and these are going to carry me through the rest of my life till my deathbed. I'll be having these realizations and aha moments and feeling more free from whatever. So yeah.
That's something you told me a long time ago that I love, where you were when I was understanding the compassion and loving yourself part, and you were like, isn't that so great? You're gonna grow in love now. And to me, that just like, oh, genius. Like, yes, like that's what I want to do. Like that's the trajectory I want to be on. And for my whole life, it's been from this place of fear and shame, you know. So and I wanted to touch on that real quickly too, because so I've had TMS symptoms, like bouts of it in my past before I even knew about mind body. Like we're talking 10, 12 years ago. So I had like really severe, not as bad, but like problematic bouts of vertigo, two separate times in my past. And because I was living I just, it didn't bother me back then. It didn't bother me too much. So they just went away in a month. And I know, like, when we hear success stories like that, like when a symptom goes away within a month or two, then we're like, oh man, what are we doing wrong? Like they got rid of it really fast. But because I wasn't dealing with myself and that inner critic, you know, it flared up 10, 12 years later into a full blown, like, what is this, 3.5 year, journey, health journey. So that's why, like, I just wanted to like remind people, like, it's normal for it to be a longer recovery process, and actually you're seeing more of those stories come out. So just accept that, like, this is the recovery process, and you're going through it. It may seem longer, but it's because we're going for true change, which changes your entire trajectory of your entire life. So that's what I wanted to let people know.
Amen, sister. I have goosebumps all over my body. True change. That's what it is. True freedom, true change. Um, and that just takes the time it takes. And all the um snappy like recovery stories, they're so great. Like, it's such a fun experiment to see your symptoms like disappear right in front of you, and you never thought that would ever happen. But it's not where it's at. I know that might sound like really annoying to hear, because you're like, if all I want is that moment of relief, but it's not where it's really at. Um, and yeah, like that will come. Like, I have a client shared with me just recently, we've been working together quite a while, and she said she still has like the fibromyalgia and the hip pain, but sometimes it's gone and then it comes back, and sometimes it's gone and then it comes back. And I'm like, yes, like this is it. When she now knows, she fully understands herself and the tools, how it works, and now she has her own process. She's starting to see those results. So thank you so much, beautiful Lianne. I loved seeing you again, and yeah, I just so loved working together with you and hearing all about your little kitties and your husband and your whole life that you're creating, and just your community that you're serving, and how you share yourself is just so beautiful.
Thank you so much, Aoife. Love you lots.
Love you loads too. Okay, well, have a beautiful day, and I'll catch you soon.